Okay guys, Eric Thane here. Just wanted to make this quick video for you that covers the 5 keys to capturing cinematic footage. Really the whole point that I want to drill into here to really hit home with you guys is this. You can get a cinematic image out of any camera. And I kind of want to prove that right now. Typically in our business we shoot most of our client work and our commercial work on Reds and other higher end cameras, but I actually spent some time recently shooting this video on a Canon Rebel T5i just with a kit lens. This is a $500 setup, super cheap, super affordable, but I wanted to show you kind of what you can do with that. Now, I'm going to start the video playing here, and you notice this isn't a huge production. I spent probably 20 minutes shooting just this video of my dad sitting at his desk working, and just got a few angles, but just wanted to be able to show what you can do even with a very cheap camera. All right, there you go. Super simple, but awesome, right? Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's talk about this, the 5 keys to capturing cinematic footage. And I really want to show you guys how you can do this with whatever camera you have. It doesn't really matter what camera you're using. I promise you can get cinematic looking footage. And so today I'm going to cover 5 things that you have to understand in order to start doing that. These are basics, they're fundamentals. Understand that no one of these things will automatically make your footage cinematic, because really cinematography is about a lot of small things that add up to a cinematic look. And really, I could teach you 100 of these. But for right now, I just want to cover the basics, and they all have to do with your camera. So if you need to pause the video and go get your camera, that's fine. Go ahead and get it, make sure you're holding it, and we're going to go ahead and make sure we get your camera set up correctly to start making these cinematic images. All right, here you go. So number 1 is your frame rate. So to start getting the cinematic look, you have to set the frame rate on your camera to 24 frames per second. In reality, it's actually 23.976, but your camera might not say that. So if it says 24, then that's fine. This is really what it's doing. This is the standard for cinema in the United States. And there are exceptions to this rule, but they're very, very rare. So if you're trying to shoot cinematic footage, you want to be shooting in 24 frames per second. What this is going to do is it's going to give you the right amount of frames in 1 second that will give you this cinematic looking motion that the movies use. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2 is your shutter speed or shutter angle. In filmmaking, what this does is it affects the amount of motion blur that you get in your image. So to get normal cinematic looking footage, your shutter speed actually needs to be double your frame rate. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, that means your shutter is going to be set at 1/48th of a second. Now, keep in mind that if you're coming from a photography background, you have to understand that as a filmmaker, you don't get to use your shutter speed to set your exposure anymore. The shutter is reserved for controlling motion blur, not setting your exposure. Your shutter always stays at double your frame rate unless you're using it to create specific effects, which you can do too. Now, when you start working with higher end cinema cameras, you may end up using what's called shutter angle. And just so you know, I won't go super deep into that right now, but you want to set that to 180 degrees. That effectively gives you double your frame rate with your shutter speed. All right. Number 3 is aspect ratio. So the standard aspect ratio that your camera probably shoots is going to be 16:9, right? So that means that the ratio between the width of your video and the height of your video is 16:9. And changing your aspect ratio is kind of an artistic decision. You can choose which aspect ratios you want to shoot in for different purposes and for different formats. But typically, shooting a wider aspect ratio is going to make your footage look more cinematic. And that's because movies are typically shot that way, and so we're used to seeing that. We recognize that as being more cinematic because it's a wider aspect ratio. If you're using higher end cinema cameras, again, they'll allow you to shoot like this in camera. But when you're using cheaper cameras like DSLRs, usually you'll have to shoot in 16:9 and then crop your footage in post later. Okay. Number 4 is your picture profile. So in order for you to get the best dynamic range and the best picture out of your camera, you need to be shooting in a flat picture profile. This could be called log, it could be called neutral, depending on which camera system you're using. A flat picture profile, what it's going to do is going to shoot the video with very low contrast and saturation, which means that in post, you actually are able to get more detail out of your camera and more color and more, you're able to do more with it when you get into color grading. If you're shooting on a Canon DSLR, you want to use the neutral profile, or you can install a third-party profile like Technicolor CineStyle. Or if you're on a Sony, then you want to set your camera to shoot an S-Log. But anyway, whatever camera system you're using, you want to make sure you're shooting in a flat profile so that you have more room to grade in post. Okay, number 5 is, and the last one is exposure. And this is super, super important. In order for you to get the best looking, highest dynamic range out of your camera and out of any camera, it is absolutely crucial that you get your exposure perfect. Especially when you're shooting on lower end systems and cheaper cameras, this becomes even more important because they don't have as much room for you to change it in post. But every camera likes to be exposed differently, so you should look up how yours works. And you want to use tools like histograms, waveforms, false color, those kinds of things to make sure that you have it dialed in perfectly. Because getting the right exposure in camera is going to make your image look better and also make it easier to color grade in post. All right? So there you have it. There's the 5 keys to capturing cinematic footage. I know we went through these really fast, but at least they'll give you some help and some basics to cover before we go into the more advanced stuff tomorrow. But again, these are only basics. These are things you just need to get right in your camera. Again, there's 100 more of these that I could teach you, but if you get these right, you're going to be off to a good start. Now, real quick, before I sign off here, I do want to talk a little bit about what we're going to cover tomorrow so that you guys are completely up to speed on what we're going to be covering in the training. And so here we go. First of all, we're going to talk about how to get the cinematic look with any camera. I talked about that, how it is possible, and I'm going to show you my methodology and how to start thinking and how to start making that happen. No matter what camera gear you're using, you can do it. Second, we're going to talk about why you should raise your rates today, and I really think that this is important as far as if you're an indie filmmaker and you're trying to run a business, you need to be charging proper rates, and I'm going to teach you why and how you should do that right now. And then third, we're going to talk about the number one thing that you should be focusing your learning on. When it comes to learning cinematography, there's one thing, and I'm not going to spoil it right now so that you guys can learn it tomorrow on the training, but there's one thing that you should be focusing your learning on more than anything else, and if you can get that right, it'll take you halfway there. And then lastly, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my new online cinematography school, Cinema Mastery, so you can look out for that as well. Anyway, that's it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope that was helpful for you. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all tomorrow and getting to know you and talking with you and answering your questions. So make sure you're there on time. We'll get started right on time, and we'll be ready to go. So it's going to be an awesome training. I'm really excited and looking forward to working with you guys, and we'll see you tomorrow.